young people's voices are elevated and given importance at a level that has never existed because the dominant tool of our culture and lives is the internet and technology, and young people will intrinsically understand that better than adults.
And this is what I wonder, like, do they feel empowered by it? Or do they feel, again, with this concept of many people not appearing to want to fully embrace responsibility and autonomy and agency, that by identifying as your mental illness, you are automatically allowing that to kind of like pass over you. You lose your agency.
But for me, it's a form of capitalistic branding. And then one day she passed me a letter that she'd written to me, and I wrote back, and we had this like pen pal. We had pen pals.
I haven't given up on that. Like, I'm still happier being an adult than if you could press the rewind button and go back to being like 14.
I think maybe this is a thing whereby the generations have become so quick in the way that they turn over that even within what is technically a millennial bracket, we are light years apart in this.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Christina Rhodes.
And I'm Tempest Rose.
We are two millennial women 4 decades in.
We're revisiting the culture that made us, with a little more hindsight.
And a lot less bullshit.
We've made our own rules.
Built our own spotlights.
And we're here to speak our minds without playing dumb.
And without playing nice.
Today we're going to talk about adulting. When I hear the term adulting, it fills me with rage.
Why is that?
I don't know. I was trying to figure it out. There's something really annoying about the word. It's cringy. It gives me the ick.
I feel like it also makes becoming an adult sound like a bad thing.
Yeah. It's like cosplaying at being a grown-up. Oh, I'm adulting, as if it's some kind of like role that you have to put on that's different from your normal state. Which I guess gets to the heart of what we'll probably end up talking about.
When we were preparing for this episode, you had what I thought was a very good suggestion, which is, why don't we start at the very beginning? Let's talk about what becoming an adult meant for us.
Yeah.
What was life back then before we were adults?
Yeah.
And that transition.
Yeah. So I am immensely grateful, as is the thing I hear so many people of our age saying, that we grew up without smartphones, without really the internet. And I guess the start of adulting is coming out of childhood into your teenage years, to have those teenage years without the ability to record everything, to have your phone in your pocket, to always be contactable, now just seems like a blissful dream.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't, not that they go hand in hand, but I wasn't wreaking chaos around. But I am very grateful that nobody had anything other than a disposable camera available to them. And then that was it, because you could make mistakes, you could find yourself, you could reinvent yourself, you could sort of do things that I just think I wouldn't feel safe to do now if I was becoming a adult now, or becoming a teenager now. And I think that is tragic, really.
Yeah. It's so tragic. I'm not surprised young people have such high levels of anxiety and stress, that they don't really drink, that they don't party, because the consequences of letting down your inhibitions, your guard, not being brand perfect 24/7 are so catastrophic. When I was in middle school, I was bullied quite a bit. And I remember once I went to the school disco, because we had school discos, and my mother picked out her best outfit for me, which I obviously agreed to wear. So I'm not blaming her. It's hilarious in hindsight. I was so unfashionably fashionable. Double denim.
Oh.
Red socks, red ballerina slip-ons.
I'm like, cute. You're like a little Punky Brewster.
Right? I mean, I think as an adult, you would look at a kid, as my mother clearly did, and go, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, that is just, disaster. Absolute nightmare. And I didn't realize that I was obviously made this huge faux pas with what I was wearing. And so we went home for the party. And I think it wasn't until we got back into school afterwards that I realized that this was the thing that was going to be my identity, and that I would be laughed at for the next few months. And I guess I only bring it up to say that the problem, I think, is that with online life, the culture around you as a kid, particularly your school culture, never ends. Like, if you're bullied, bullying's horrible whenever. And I know lots of adults have this like dream that you'll eradicate bullying. But I think the sad nature is that bullying is part of human nature, and especially amongst children, because I guess it's all about kind of who's in, who's out, forming these like groups, social hierarchy, all of that kind of thing. During the times where I have experienced bullying, when you go home, there's peace. And whilst people who talk about you might continue to do so between each other, they are not doing it online where everybody else is involved, where everybody else can watch it and get involved. And you have the stress of not looking at it, but knowing that it's happening, or you just watch it all unfold. I cannot imagine the levels of stress that must bring to teenagers.
Yeah, of course. And particularly when you're at this moment in your life when you're trying to naturally build resilience and try to understand what that is, but you're not going to have it in like heaps. At least I certainly didn't as like a teenager. You are sensitive, you are, anxious around these things. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm not surprised that you get suicides from online bullying cases and, more self-harm and all sorts of other horrible things. Because, yeah, I mean, it would just be an absolute mindfuck. Awful.
Yeah. So we're very lucky. If you're younger than us, you can imagine a world where once you said goodbye to your parents and left the house, that is it. They didn't know where you were, what you were doing. I think we're not obviously quite Gen X, who are literally the generation of like, don't come home until the porch light goes on, and you just let your kids go out into the neighborhood and play. My parents were certainly still more not overbearing, but like
involved.
Yes, than that. I got a pager when I was 16, and that was just the most exciting thing anyone had ever seen. But communication was only one way. You rang a landline, left a message with the operator, and they put that in a little message and sent it to you. And I don't think my parents, who are very untechnological, even used it. Just me and my friends used it for each other. So you were at home or you were at your friend's house, and you had to be in certain places at certain times. But other than that, you had a level of freedom that's just not heard of now, I think. And that, done healthily, was incredibly important. I'm so grateful for it.
You know what you've just reminded me is that, I'd be curious if you did this too, but I would spend hours when I was younger talking to my friends on the phone.
Hours.
Like, I didn't even know what we said. Like,
hours.
Like, you and I can like have a long conversation, but usually there's a bottle of wine or like 4 involved. If we're going to spend 12 hours talking to each other. Not that I went soberly very happily, but do you know what I mean? Yeah. And you like sit there also when there might just be like a pause. You wouldn't like hang up the phone.
Yeah.
Just keep sitting there together. And because nobody has landlines anymore, I've never seen my niece or nephew talk to their friend. I guess maybe they do it. I think my nephew does. He has like people that he plays Minecraft with, but they don't talk on the phone to people for long periods of time.
Yeah, I forgot we did that. It's so funny in hindsight because you only have normally one landline in the house.
Yeah.
So when I was on the phone, having spent all day with my friends, all day at school, all day, where all you do is hang out and talk.
Yeah.
And then you come home, and we had a time in the UK for landlines. I don't know if you had this in America. It was free after a certain time. So everybody is waiting until you're looking at me like, what kind of backwards prison is this? No, 6 o'clock.
One soap bar too.
Yeah. 6 o'clock, and landline calls are free, and that's it. Every single 13-year-old in the country just picks up the phone to talk to their friend who they've spent all day with. 4 hours. 4 hours. And now, I think that's so funny because our generation, like when the phone rings, I look at the number, and even if I know the number, I have this moment where I'm like, oh, I don't know what they want. Unless it's like a really good friend. Like if you called me, I would answer the phone because you're not going to like frivolously ring me. But, or it's an emergency.
Just to talk
like,
for 4 hours.
I feel like you'd be like, hey, I feel like talking. Do you have some time? Or we just voice note each other for over 4 hours. But now I'm just like, I do not want to pick up this fucking phone.
But even what you just said, I think the concept that like voice noting is the same thing as calling somebody is I think what a lot of young people think, that they just like you just reply voice notes, but that is not the same dynamic.
No, not at all. Voice notes for me are like, because we, buckle up, kids. We used to write letters to each other. Did you do this?
Yes. Oh my God.
Endless
Yes.
letters to each other. When I was younger, I made this little friend on my street who we would just walk past each other on the way to school and just like, I don't know, you just like acknowledge like another kid around your age, and maybe you have this moment where you're both wearing the same backpack or whatever. And then one day she passed me a letter that she'd written to me, and I wrote back, and we had this like whole pen pal. We had pen pals.
Yeah.
That is much more like voice noting, I think, because you're not having a two-way conversation. You're sort of brain dumping your own thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think that's very, very accurate. I was a sad little kid, and I even bought they used to sell pen pal books. So you could like find, I don't like you could like find a pen pal in, I don't know, like Uzbekistan, and you could like write to them. And I did sometimes, and I would like write to random people,
God,
and they would write back. It was so funny. Yeah, man, pen pals are great, and writing letters was great.
So I think we've got a lot to say on teenage years, but can we go through milestones?
Sure.
So yeah, you get to like 13. I think that's like a big thing. And then obviously like 16 in the UK, you can drive. Probably younger in the States.
It depends where you live. If you live in like a farm state, you can usually get a provisional at 14. But otherwise, it's 15, 16, depending on your state.
Yeah. And then in the UK, 18, you can legally drink. But by then, I feel, because ID was much less strict in the UK than I think it is now. Or maybe it's just that I'm in London, and they're very strict in London now, particularly in the West End. So I went to my first nightclub at 14. My sister took me. She was at university. I didn't have fake ID. Like, you just sort of, yeah, you're probably fine. In you come, get a drink. But officially you can drink at 18. I don't really remember turning 18, to be honest. I remember turning 21 and having like a big party, and that was really fun. But I already felt very adult by that age. So I didn't consider it a huge milestone psychologically. Did you, like with any of those sort of big teenage milestones? Did you have any epiphanies?
I think going in reverse order, I would agree. By 21, I had been living on my own for a few years at that stage and had a job. And yeah, like it didn't feel like my parents still supported me in various ways, but I very much felt like an adult. I was living like an adult life by that point. I'm just trying to think now. I haven't thought about my 18th birthday or my 16th birthday in a long time. Do you remember for my 16th birthday, I grew up in a very comfortable background, and all of my friends got cars for their 16th birthday. And I woke up on my 16th birthday, and my dad is like, I got you a surprise. And I said, oh, what is it? And then at the foot of my bed were 2 model cars. To his credit, he listened to the 2 cars that I had wanted to get, which was a pink Cadillac Eldorado with shark fins and a blue Ford pickup truck. And he'd found them in little miniature toy size and given them to me, which was sweet. But also as a 16-year-old, I was like, fuck this. Oh, God, where's my car?
So angry. Did he know that would be a fact? Like, did he think that was nice?
No, I think he thought it was funny.
Oh, okay. I picture you growing up in like Sweet Valley High or Beverly Hills.
It wasn't totally dissimilar. No, I think California, but still. So I don't remember my 16th birthday that much. I don't think we did. Oh, no, that's not true. What we did for my 16th birthday was not that important. It was just silly. I think we went to a spa. We went to a spa because we wanted to feel like, I don't know, ladies who lunch. You're like 35.
Yeah.
But yeah, on my 18th birthday, we did get away with some drinking in the US, but obviously it's 21 is the actual age. And like they were really sassy with it. If I had many fake IDs when I was younger, but by the time I think it was like 18, 19, you would have it scanned and they could actually tell if you were in the official California like system.
Yeah.
But somebody I went to high school with got jailed because they managed to get an official DMV, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles, machine. So like they were making real IDs.
Oh my God. And they went to prison?
probably got like a fine.
Oh, okay.
It's a child, Tempest.
It's America. For all I know, they got the death penalty.
Yeah, it's like comfortable America. So there's no crimes.
True.
Crime-free living.
You raise an interesting point with the spa that we've talked about many times, which I think is different to now. Like, I could not wait to be an adult. My entire teenage years were geared around being as grown up as possible, wanting to appear older. Like Sex and the City, Friends, this is what we watched. We wanted to move out of home. We wanted to get flats together with our friends. I wanted to have a career. I wanted to be an adult, be perceived as an adult, dress like an adult. It's strange to me to see that like this. I guess this is the term adulting, this like strange idea that like you're having to cosplay at something you actually aren't.
Yeah.
Whereas I would have quite happily have been an adult at like 13 had I legally been allowed to.
Oh my God, completely. But I wonder how much is it becoming an adult, and now I specifically remember where I was when I turned 18, but becoming an adult back then, there was more mystery around it, right? Because the internet existed, but not in the same way that it does now. So you didn't have like as many interpretations like what an adult could be apart from like the few that you had in your life, right? Like your parents, your friends' parents, your teachers, the people who worked in stores around you, I guess. But that was basically people you read about in newspapers. But to me, it felt like there was like this whole world that you could explore, and you could also become different things, and you could uncover different types of people and types of culture, and like you could explore in a way, which I don't know, like maybe kids today feel that way too. But I would question how mysterious it still feels.
Okay, yeah. We are saying we could only do that by becoming a grown-up, but nowadays you could sit on the internet and be in different countries, have different experiences. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before. You make a very good point. I was trying to think about like what being an adult meant to me. I think it meant freedom. But obviously you're talking about this interim stage before, because then you become more of an adult and you have a lot of responsibility and you lose a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
But when you're a teenager and you have pressure on you from your parents, you have pressure on you from your school, and then depending on, I guess, your life, whether you have pressure from your friendship circles, or if you're really great at the violin, you might feel like that something that should be a nice hobby is also exerting a pressure on you, on who you're going to be, on what your identity should be, on what you should do with your life. The idea about being an adult had this idea of like total freedom to decide how you wanted to be on your own terms. And when we discussed that before, you raised an interesting point that because kids get to be whoever they want online constantly, whether that's kind of killed that desire. But the sad thing is that being who you are in the real world is very different to being whoever you want online, because it's you and I both sort of, I've read, and you're reading The Anxious Generation. What do they call it? Like low barrier to entry, high barrier to entry thing.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like the phone, it's being in the phone world versus being in like the online world versus the offline world. Yeah. There's no barrier to entry to who you can be on the online world, because you can be anyone, and you can also like leave immediately.
Yeah.
You can just drop people. You don't have to you don't have the same level of commitment to the world that you do offline.
Yeah. So if we wanted to pretend to be X, Y, and Z, you had to go and do that. And obviously there's limitations on that as a child or as a teenager. Whereas in an online space, yes, that freedom is totally there, but there's much less worth in it because it's so easily accessible. It's disposable. There we go.
Disposable. Yeah. Completely. I mean, I do think that looking back on it, I'd say some of my, I don't say like happiest memories, but some of my, like the things which I look back most positively on are those moments of exploration, because you had to like commit to, I'm going to go find somebody who, like you gave a good example, you might see somebody who has, the same CD that you have. And so you might ask them questions about, or they're wearing like a t-shirt from the band that you love. And so you go and ask them questions because you know that they might have this like extra knowledge that you don't have about, who else might be great inside of that subculture or that type of music or that, type of life, really was what it felt like. And you you had to show up and you had to be there and you had to put yourself out there into that space to see, are these my people? Is this my space? Versus, yeah, you go online, like you can just go anywhere, but you don't get the same sense of belonging or not belonging and then moving on to something else.
Yeah, I really feel the internet has killed subculture. And whilst some of that is great in that it's much easier for you to find like-minded people, we grew up in a time where, the music was what was in the charts. Like there was mainstream culture and that was very readily accessible. But there was such a joy in this almost like Cluedo-esque, not like Cluedo, but like detective work that you had to do to, like you say, find your people. So we had subculture, culture that wasn't the mainstream, and often that's centered around music and fashion.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we didn't have Spotify or YouTube. Like if you liked a song and you wanted to know more about the artist and other artists like that, you had to go to the record store. You had to find a fanzine, you had to be like, certain types of music, people dress in a certain way. So if you saw somebody who dressed in a way that signified that they were into that music, then you would want to make friends of them and ask them. And it was this, I think it's just it's even the word, like there's a satisfaction to it. Again, I just think isn't really prevalent in internet culture because you've worked so hard to find something out. There's a much bigger reward to doing so. It's meaningful.
Yeah. What about the role of responsibility? Like, I was not afraid to have a job. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to have my own money. I wanted to go out and be working. Was that just my weird Americanism, or did you feel that too?
No, I was desperate to get a job. I got my first job at 15 and I can't remember what order it happened in, whether I found it and then kind of put the case to my parents or vice versa. And yeah, it's all just part of just being older, being responsible. I ended up it's just a little shop, so being like the weekend manager, and that was so exciting. Desperation for responsibility because it meant adulthood and it meant independence. I definitely feel this idea. Yeah, again, when I talk to younger people, in honesty, I don't spend a lot of time around teenagers, but I spend quite a bit of time around people in their early 20s to early 30s. So I guess younger millennials and very old Gen Z. And they seem, not all of you, but in general, a lot more immature than I feel we were at that age. And some of that's to do with responsibility. And they seem to want to make everything else somebody else's responsibility, including responsibility for themselves in a way that I find very bizarre. It's this extreme kind of offloading of you have to guarantee that I'm X, Y, and Z, or I'll experience this, that, and the other, or you didn't tell me this, and everybody else is responsible for their own sense of self, their own well-being, how they move through the world, the environment that they're in. I find it bizarre because it's so different to how we grew up. But I find it very dangerous because at the end of the day, we are the only people responsible for ourselves. And you have to learn about yourself, about your environments, how to read your environments, how to assess if something is safe, not safe, how you feel about it. It might not be that a space is unsafe, but just that it's not suitable for you personally. All of that is responsibility. And you think you lose a lot of that self-knowledge when you grow up with this idea, and I don't know where it comes from, that somehow everybody else is responsible for you. That's what children think, because that's what children experience, of course, because children have no power. By the time you get to adulthood, you should have left that childish way of thinking behind. And I don't know why that's happened. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Such a good question. I mean, my instinct is that it's a muscle, right? So if it's not a muscle that you practice using very often, which I suppose if you don't have to have experiences where you are showing up in new environments or where you are needing to sort of do this level of self-exploration, and you kind of, because you're living in more of an online world, things are coming to you in a way, right? Like you Google something and okay, you had to type it in, but then, do you know what I mean? More of it's just, it's flowing directly to you as opposed to you having to go out and get it.
Right.
Then I wonder if that affects your ability to feel a sense of agency in how you lead your life.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I don't know though, but it is very troubling and it's very worrisome because you just think if you don't flex that muscle, that agency muscle, and taking pride in what you're doing in your actions and responsibility for them when they go right or wrong, then what kind of world will we be living in 30 years?
I don't even want to think about it.
I mean, I'll be dead, but
what, 30 years?
Yeah. Then I'll be on my way to the moon. The world's going this direction. I don't want to be here.
Yeah, later.
Just kidding.
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's such a good point though around just this like weird sense of just like nothing has anything to do with you. Like it's somebody else's problem or fault.
Yes, and everything happens to you. And I hadn't thought of that, of the internet thing. We identified this kind of sweet spot in your 20s. So when we started this whole podcast, we were like, look, get to a certain age in your 40s where you can actually see the development of your life a bit more into adulthood. And I can definitely see this pattern in the decades, you know, so like teenage years is obviously, I mean, for us, like rebellion, trying to find out who you are, grappling with and thirsting for a sense of independence. That's certainly how I felt. I don't know if young people would say that about their teenage years now, but I'd say that was pretty common probably amongst our age group. Then your 20s is this time where it's both like the best and the worst time because you have for the first time this freedom that is, if you've left home and you have a job, you are relying less on your parents. I mean, you know, my parents still helped me out a bit. I was an actor. You're in the world. You're trying to find out, you know, who you are, what you're doing on your own rather than in the sort of safe environment of your school and everything. And so like 20s is hard, isn't it? Like I feel like when we were young, there was this acknowledgement that being in your 20s is shit. You're broke. You're probably working a shitty dead-end job. You don't necessarily know what you want to be in life, and that sucks. Or you do know, but you're miles away from getting there, and you might not even, depending on what it is, be able to even work in that field. You and I were in entertainment, so you know, even just to get the shittiest job in entertainment is a competition. You're living with friends normally, and that's super fun, but often, you know, you can't afford great places to live. And you are the least important person in society, in your job. But also you are only responsible, mostly, I know obviously everyone has different lives, but it's unlikely, particularly from our backgrounds, that you have a family, that you have children. For our parents, maybe they were with children and stuff, families when they were younger. We didn't have that. We literally, our money was ours. You spent it how you liked. You got home when you wanted to. All that really mattered is if you could get up for work the next day. But, you know, my work wasn't important. If I missed a waitressing shift and lost my job, I'd get another waitressing job. You know, it wasn't... I think you get to your 30s and 40s and look back and be like, wow, I could be an adult without the mortgage, without children to look after, or caring for older relatives, or a job where it actually matters if I'm so hungover I can't speak the next day or I sleep in. So it does get a bit of a magical veneer at the other end, I think.
For sure. Although I wonder around, I'm just going to like step in a landmine here, but how prevalent it is to take mental health days now. Like, I'm somebody who has suffered my entire life with mental health issues, like depression and anxiety. I've been on various forms of medication in the past, but I like the concept that I could call in sick for a mental health day was
Is that a thing?
An absolute non-starter when I was growing up.
But is it a thing now?
Oh yeah, it's a big thing. Yeah.
Really?
Oh my God, because I was reading the other day around this, and in particular in the UK, it's a real issue around people calling in sick with mental health days. And again, I believe you know me, I'm like a firm believer in therapy. I think that like I love that mental health has like more of an open space now, but you still have to like get up and deal with your life. Just because you have either having a bad mental health day or you have a mental issues that you're dealing with, you need to deal with them. doesn't become, it's like, I think one of the things now is you can see is it's becoming, for a lot of people, their identity. So this is becoming who they are rather than something that they are dealing with.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't know the way that I was, the world in which I grew up had it totally right either. Like, I think there was more space to be made for some of this, more understanding, more empathy. But I don't think that's healthy to identify as your mental illness.
No, that's just totally alien to our generation. It's much more, I think, our age group. We wanted to like smash labels, be free of labels, be who you wanted to be. And I find it very confusing that with younger people, the labels are everything, like you say, and how you identify, and especially that you would choose to identify with things that, and I don't, sorry if this comes across shadily, I don't mean it like that. This is the perspective of our age, to identify with things that previously would have been considered negatives. It's very odd. Like, it's so not our generation. Maybe for younger millennials. I think maybe this is a thing whereby the generations have become so quick in the way that they turn over that even within what is technically a millennial bracket, we are light years apart in this.
Yeah.
And I had this discussion once with one of my students, and I said to her, this kind of is a little weird to me because you, as a group, there's a lot of like anti-capitalism chat. I have enjoyed some of this myself. But for me, it's a form of capitalistic branding, this extreme drive to commodify yourself and your experiences, and whether it's your identity, and to subsume within that things that might be health related or mental health related. That's just neo-capitalism to me.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that one of the reasons why, and this is not my idea, but one of the reasons why there are so many prevalent labels for so many different kinds of like mental illness is because in America, in order for insurance to qualify you having care, they need to have it basically be in the official book as this is a thing, right? So every year, more and more types of mental illness, like more and more specific types of mental illness, are being created. More and more labels are being created so that you can get help, but also so that you can be sold. And like, again, I believe in therapy. I believe in like medication for mental illness. I've taken medication for mental illness, but it's so that you can be sold something. Like, the big pharma has a huge role inside of that. And I find it so interesting. And again, from my perspective, from our perspective inside of, like our pocket of our generation, I would find the concept that I am anxious depressive versus I suffer from anxiety and depression off and on, do you know what I mean, at varying heights, very limiting. And I find it so interesting that people don't feel limited by that, but they feel, I suppose they feel, and this is what I wonder, like, do they feel empowered by it? Or do they feel, again, with this concept of many people not appearing to want to fully embrace responsibility and autonomy and agency, that by identifying as your mental illness, you are automatically allowing that to kind of like pass over you. You lose your agency. I don't know. Maybe it's like one step too far, but
no, I totally see what you're saying. I've just not really considered it from that angle before. I think there's definitely something there. Yeah. Yes. I've got like so many competing thoughts at the same time. I'm struggling to know which one to start with. Agency. I'm going to scan back a little bit. For me, this is related. I hope you don't feel that I've like just taken what you said and gone, anyway, I'm going to talk about something else. But when you were talking about like mental health days and all of this stuff, and I suddenly thought, this idea of like making things other people's responsibility with this younger culture of I can't come in today because of X, Y, and Z really has to rest on the idea that also people don't rely on you.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right?
The award goes to Tempest.
Thanks very much. Which again is this sort of sharing of responsibility. You and I both run businesses. Mine is slightly differently structurally because of the way I tend to work with performers who are normally freelance. You have a more structured business than I do. But even within the concept of like a show, or even just in regular jobs, there's this idea of like, well, you take a job, but the job isn't just there to kind of validate your existence. It's actually a two-way situation here whereby you are being paid to be responsible for something and to be relied on. And if you are not there, then the burden falls on other people that you work with or for to make up for the thing that isn't therefore happening in that time. And there's very little acknowledgement that I hear amongst some younger people when they discuss this idea of, I should be able to take a day off whenever I feel like it. When I feel that I'm not in the right mindset to go to work or whatever it is, you know, it's all kind of very self-orientated. And actually, you don't live in a vacuum. You have responsibility.
Yeah.
That's part of being a grown-up. It's part of having a job, especially having a job. Sorry, I feel like I'm now dragging us further away from your really good points, and forgive me. You and I have talked a lot about this idea that we hear a lot from younger people. They're very frustrated that in their 20s, where they have very little experience, very little knowledge, they want to come into positions where they are being given a lot of responsibility, a lot of power, and they want the salaries that come with that. But there doesn't seem to be this joined up thinking between like, I mean, firstly, I would say that you're not ready for that anyway. But secondly, let's say you did get that, then you doubly can't not turn up to work one day because of X, Y, and Z, because with that level of seniority comes the extra levels of responsibility. You and I, many, many times in our lives, have had to get up, do the fucking job when we've been in crisis, when we've been in turmoil, when our mental health has been really difficult, or our physical health has been under the weather, because this understanding that, well, the buck stops here. Do you know what I mean? And it's not the case that I want to be like, I have to do it, so you have to suffer it too. But I do think it's, again, part of this whole adulthood thing.
Yeah, totally. And I think so, just going back to, well, just on that point, I think that, you know, I grew up in an environment where eventually I went into therapy, but like you didn't acknowledge it. You didn't talk, like, you know, even for Americans, we didn't talk as much about mental illness and our therapists and everything else. It was certainly more accepted than it is here by like a country mile. Yeah, definitely. But it wasn't, but it really wasn't like talked about or acknowledged, right? And I feel like now it's swung so far on the other extreme that people want to like live by it, right? And where we need to kind of get to, I feel, is that you acknowledge it, like, okay, you're having a bad mental health day, and that sucks. And it sucks, and I'm sorry, but like, how are you going to deal with it and get out of bed and get your clothes on and get to your job? Because that's where you need to be. Like, you just can't like wallow in it indefinitely and make it everybody else's problem and then still expect to get paid. This is madness. I mean, and I am going to sound, I'm sure, very old and cranky right now, but I do see it. I mean, I employ a lot of people who are under 30, and some of whom are exceptionally hard workers. And unfortunately, well, as I would agree with me, many of whom are not. And it's this concept, like you were saying, of I have no real experience. I have, hopefully, good sound mind and like ready to work hard, hopefully. But yeah, you have no experience. You don't have like your own client list that you're bringing to the table. You don't have all these other things that I would expect of somebody who's maybe, say, 10 years older than you, who I would consider paying the kind of salary that people are asking, but they still expect to be able to have everything that they want right now without having worked for it. And that part is maddening to me, because I think we both were and are like ambitious AF, but like with that came a graft. And I was willing to do the work to get what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around. I think there's a simultaneous thing of, like, I understand the critiques of, like, the society that we live in, and that for really young people, this, if you work hard, you'll get X, Y, and Z, which has sort of been the traditional format for at least a good few generations, doesn't really work in the same way for them because of the way, like, I mean, this is what I'm told, maybe somebody will present me with some stats that this just isn't true. Buying a house is out of the league, salaries because of, I don't know, whatever stage of capitalism we're in are pressured to be so low. So much of it then gets outsourced. So much of these roles get taken over by AI or, automated this, that, and the other. So I do get that. But it doesn't change the fact that I also do spend quite a bit of time around some people for whom that's not really their chief complaint. Their chief complaint is that they have been given this idea, I guess, that they are ready immediately for roles that normally take years and years of experience in jobs that they have never worked in before and in fields that they've never worked in before. So if there's anyone listening thinking, oh, that's such a millennial complaint, but it's not really true. Young people don't really complain about that. What they're complaining about is having, actually economically maybe some quite shit prospects. Yeah, sure. But it is true that I hear people who are like, oh, I want to work in a super desirable industry. I've never worked in this before, but now I'm making cups of tea. It's basically a hate crime. No, it's just what being in your 20s is like. And I don't know why nobody's explained this to you. I mean, we watched endless TV shows that are all about how it sucks to be in your 20s because you have the least amount of income, the least amount of power, but you are expected to be an adult in the world. But that there's a sort of fun element to that.
But you touched on something just then that was also part of something we were discussing earlier this week. I wonder if it is confusing to grow up in a way where actually society is giving your generation's voice a huge amount of airtime and a lot of feeling like what you have to say and your peers have to say matters in a way that they didn't tell us that. And it's not that I'm saying it doesn't matter, but when you look at sort of, again, with gaining expertise and society and everything else, that when I started at any business, you start at the bottom of the food chain, or maybe like a couple rows up because, I don't know, you happened to go to college, or you'd worked a couple jobs which sort of had a overplay, or whatever. Still, nobody really cared what you thought. You were there to do a job. And then eventually, once you'd proved yourself, then they did care a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until you're the boss, right? But now, because of everything about how the world works, and I think I heard somebody put it interestingly earlier this week where, because that journalism is about selling advertisements. And so if and then because of the whole world went online, including journalism, and suddenly the people who are running these publications don't know what the online world is like in the same way that the youths who are working for them do, then they suddenly have given more credence to what they have to say. So I just wonder, do you know what I mean? On the one hand, I think it's outrageous that somebody trots into my office and expects a 6-figure salary when they've done nothing to prove themselves in the world and the industry in which I work. But at the same time, if you've kind of grown up in this world where you think everyone cares what you have to say, then maybe you have an inflated sense of importance.
Yes, that's so true. I hadn't considered that as a factor in discussions we've had before, which is, we now live this weird topsy-turvy existence whereby young people's voices are elevated and given importance at a level that has never existed because the dominant tool of our culture and lives is the internet and technology, and young people will intrinsically understand that better than adults. But that's never before been the case. No one gave a fuck what we thought. And maybe, that's kind of, at the time, it certainly doesn't feel like a good thing, and it feels very frustrating and very disempowering. I suppose it even instills in you the sense of I will make my voice heard. I will be somebody who someone listens to. Whereas now, a 13-year-old can run a YouTube channel where millions of people listen to them all the goddamn time. And look, that's lovely. And perspective of youth is very important. But the perspective of youth is inexperienced. But now we have this sort of super idealistic, super inexperienced, super authoritarian. Young people are very authoritarian. I know. I was one. You get older, your views soften. I think you learn more about the fact that experiences in life can play a huge part in how people feel about things, how they change their minds about things, that things are actually much more complicated than they seem when you're younger. So, there's a reason why teenagers are often used as the foot soldiers in movements for stuff, because you are quite single-minded. You see things in a very, very black and white way. And yes, your voice has been given elevation. to a never before seen level because of the way the internet is. I also think, I can't remember if we discussed this on the other one. I know I mentioned the book Generations that I looked at. Millennials, and again, we are the top end of the age of millennials. This is 20 years of people younger than us in this bracket. The generation who got fed the concept of self-esteem at a level that previous generations did not. And it wasn't self-esteem based on your achievements. It was you are special just for existing. And so the books, I was telling this to my husband, I said, this writer says that, isn't this funny? She says millennials are the most confident generation. And he's like, not confident, or entitled. But yeah, because you've been told from childhood that without having to do anything, you are incredibly special. You are perfect as you are, that you don't have to change or evolve or do anything. And I think there's a middle ground. I think self-esteem is really important for kids. And I think everybody's life has value. But there's a difference between empty self-esteem and earned self-esteem, which is you get self-esteem by not just by existing, but by taking on responsibility, doing things in the world, achieving things, overcoming obstacles and challenges. And those can be personal hurdles. It's not always about like the person that wins or the person that gets the part. It's about taking on personal challenges and learning that you have resilience. And that's how you gain self-esteem. But our generation was kind of fed self-esteem with none of that. And that's obviously going to have an impact. If you've been told since you were little, that you're the smartest, that you're the cleverest, that you're the most talented, then of course you're going to turn up at a job and wonder why everybody else around you doesn't think that at all. And you're on minimum wage and go and make a fucking cup of tea because at the moment that's all you know how to do. And there's this lack of this knowledge dropped into my head now that when somebody starts in a job that they know nothing about, it actually takes quite a lot of work on the other people in the job who are more experienced because they have to train you and they have to accommodate for your obviously inevitable fuck-ups because you don't know what you're doing, but you still have responsibility. And that burden falls on other people around you. You don't operate in a vacuum.
But I also wonder if there is a sort of backlash for this self-esteem, right? Because we also live in a world now where you do see so many people advertising this kind of like absolute get rich quick. You don't need to do anything. I saw somebody advertising on my Instagram the other day for like, how to make online courses. You don't need to have an expertise. You don't need to know anything. And the way they justify it, of course, like makes some sense, but like it just is crazy, right? Like we don't value expertise anymore.
No.
And so I wonder if you've been sort of fed this concept that you are, not that you are enough as you are, because, you are, everybody is enough. They are like, I do believe like, every little kid is a fabulous enough little entity and every adult as well. But that's not to say that you're infallible or you're perfect or you know everything or you're entitled to have whatever you want or you should be at the top of everything. And so I wonder if you've kind of like been fed this concept that you're not just enough, but you're perfect and you're great no matter what you do, no matter how many days you miss of work, then, and then you kind of show up and like you said, like you show up and people don't give a shit and people don't value you. Does that actually then end up leading to like more anxiety and depression because you just think, well, this isn't what I was sold. It was supposed to be so easy.
Oh, yes. Yes. 100%. I feel sorry for a lot of young people because they have been sold this total lie. They're dealing with a really difficult online culture that we talked about with bullying and stuff. And we've done in other episodes about kind of like beauty standards and self-esteem and all of that. And it's a really horrible mixed message that you're being shown that whilst being told how perfect and special you are. And then, yes, I suppose it makes a lot of sense. You get out into the world. The real world is not the online world. You actually can't just say stuff. You have to do it. It's not enough to say you're very smart or that you deserve X, Y, and Z. You actually have to live the thing that you're talking about. And yeah, I mean, I guess if what we're saying pans out, then we are really not preparing young people for the realities of life as a society, you know?
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, I'll acknowledge that this is very much a middle class problem for
of
sure. And,
course.
of course, I know you know that as well,
Mm,
but it definitely applies, I think, to sections of people that I know who will grow up in this kind of very closeted, special kind of place.
mm,
It's certainly not, of course, how everyone, even in this country, grows up.
mm,
But those are the types of people who I think will have the most amplified voices, whether that's online, through education, through connections, family connections, access to industries that might be like elite industries or academic industries. So it is a
mm.
sort of dominant voice, even if they're not the dominant section of society.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. And I think, again, even if you maybe, aren't getting it at home, you're still going to see it on like everything on your feed, everything people are trying to sell you. You don't need to know anything. Just look at me. I'm beautiful and gorgeous and 20 years old and a multimillionaire, and I did it overnight. And you just need to give me 2,000 pounds and I'll show you how to do it too. Like,
The MLM of an internet
yeah,
generation.
it really is.
What do you think of manifesting?
Manifesting, man. Do you remember The Secret came out?
Yeah, I never read it though.
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think I got into debate with my mother about this recently. So I think The Secret is a really toxic book because it fails to acknowledge the reality of the fact that many people, unfortunately, in the world live in an environment that they can't change everything about, right?
Hmm.
You can't be a child and just keep wishing for a bicycle, right? Because you are powerless. Like, you don't have a job, you don't have your own money. Maybe your parents don't want you to have it. Maybe they're not very nice people and they don't want to give you anything. Like, who knows what it is, but that's not in your control.
Hmm.
I think it touched on, I think the concept of manifesting, I actually do really agree with. And any time that the moments in my life which have like gone really well, part of that journey has been identifying for myself what I want, visualizing it, making it super fucking clear. And then you just trick your mind into suddenly seeing those opportunities everywhere, right? If all I want to be doing, you live in this world, there's all these things going on all the time. And if you create a sense of focus on what you want, I do believe you are more likely to get it. But that's very different than just, to my mind, that still goes with graft. It's not like I'm going to visualize being a billionaire and I'm just going to be a billionaire and I don't need to do anything different. I'm just going to think about it and then I'm just going to wake up and be a billionaire tomorrow magically. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I think if you understand that what it means is to focus yourself and your life and your attitude so that, okay, I want to be a billionaire. So I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to not really see my friends. My sole focus is around making money. I'm going to do everything every waking hour to be making money and being hard at making money. Then sure, you might have like a better chance at making more money. Like, of course, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing with just like, I'm going to dream it and it will become. I don't know. What do you think of it?
Oh, yeah, I agree with you. So I always feel a bit stuck because I have like the dual thought processes you have. I haven't read The Secret. So where does The Secret sit on this like scale of how manifesting operates and how important it is in and of its own right?
I mean, I don't want to be quoted on it because it's been a very long time since I've read it, but I do remember being annoyed by it at the end because it's just not real. It's much more just sort of like, and I think they're trying to imply these same things, but they don't necessarily go into that requires work, that it requires sacrifice, right? If you're going to focus on one thing, it means you are intrinsically not focusing on something else. So you are making choices there around what you want to be focused on. And that's what it doesn't go into. From memory.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
In general, on manifesting, I agree with you. I think you can go to some really toxic places, but at its best level, like I say, it's literally just having focus. When you draw your focus to something, you will see opportunities and open doors around you. And I think, yeah, sometimes that can seem quite magical. Like, I've experienced things or done things in my life that do seem sort of straight out of the daydreams that I might have had when I was younger. But I don't know, coincidence is obviously a thing in life, but also like subconsciously, I don't think my subconscious made that happen poof out of thin air. Yeah, it's to do with focus, who you surround yourself with, the opportunities that you look out for. So when manifesting, I think, leads to self autonomy, is it?
Yeah.
That can be really powerful when you get into magical thinking with manifesting. And look, don't get me wrong, I'll light some green candles and spray some frankincense incense and enjoy a lot of that, and have done for many years. But you have to be proactive. You have to do the work. Sometimes I worry that manifesting, because it's a real woman thing, I think, is this kind of like encourages this sort of powerlessness, because it's not about going into the world and doing something. It's about staying at home and wishing for something, which is actually very feminine.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you see manifestation as a passive activity.
I think sometimes the way that people can talk about it, and this is what you touched on, I think, in that like you didn't dream hard enough,
right?
And also doesn't take into account, I guess, what some people will call privilege, but just the realities of who you are and your life and the forces that are beyond your control. Because in a way, like, I know prosperity gospel isn't manifesting, but there's the slight same crossover, isn't there? That like you didn't pray to God hard enough, or you weren't blessed enough, or you're not morally good enough, and that's why you're not rich. And all of this sort of contends to that side of the thing, where what you ultimately end up is you haven't done anything or been empowered to do anything, but it's all really your fault because you didn't really want it.
Oh yeah, we could do an entire episode on that. And it's backbone of American culture. I mean, I would agree with you, but I do think that it's interesting that, you know, I think it had a resurgence when we were growing up, and now it definitely, all the new age stuff is like having a comeback. And I feel like manifestation is right there at the forefront.
Yeah.
As what I would say is a pretty like misunderstood thing. I don't know a single rational person who would disagree with the fact that if you just focus on what you want and that becomes an obsession for you, you are more likely to get it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But that means, again, because you're going to be working hard at it, you're going to be making sacrifices, you're going to be doing everything you can in your control to get what you want.
Yeah.
And not always. Again, like obviously circumstantial things, you know, are going to like prohibit that. But yeah, so you need to have a better chance at it. Do you think there's any reason why younger people now feel disincentivized to become an adult?
I think they don't see the rewards of it. I think that I wonder if they're growing up in an environment that's much more cosseted, like helicopter parenting. There's a real fear of letting your kids just go out unattended into the world. Cannot recommend enough The Anxious Generation. It's a brilliant book.
So good.
And it goes into not just like the online culture for that, but the offline, like how schools run, things like sports clubs, playgrounds, parenting. So I think that doesn't help. We were talking about this interesting thing about like what online does in terms of like FOMO and too much choice. And it reminded me of, so like when I teach people to create work, I say you have to have a central focus. And sometimes people find this really difficult. So, you know, in burlesque, you create acts and they're like little 5-minute performance pieces. And you have to have something that roots the whole of this, like one inspiration or one focal point. Because if you don't, then every time you come and make a decision, your choice is infinite. I could have any piece of music. I could have any piece of costuming. And so you become quite destabilized by too much choice. It's debilitating. And I wonder if there's a crossover there with you're saying like young people have an exposure to the world at such a vastly big level, like hugely grand level than we ever did. Our worlds were very small. That's not the case nowadays. That there's a debilitatingness in that. Not just that all of a sudden you're seeing the horrors of the world all around you, but you're being... It's not the case necessarily that you, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. Although maybe they are being told that, and that's another problem there. But yeah, am I making sense? Like,
oh, completely. I mean, I would imagine that is very true, because I think, I mean, I see it even in myself where, you know, you go online and social media, you just feel like there's all these possibilities and there's all these things which you just weren't thinking about. You know, back like even when we were, even when I started my first company, like I didn't have to do the level of like self-marketing that I do now and the level of, just constantly being online and seeing what's going on. You could just actually know what was happening in your workplace and in your industry, and that was enough. And so, yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. So I can imagine if you're growing up even younger, I mean, yeah, I'd want to live in my mom's basement forever.
Yeah, because you're being drained by being exposed to too much.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, it's too much choice.
Too much choice. I think even just like, especially because when you're young, you do have this very activist streak. Like, I think every generation has that.
Yeah.
Well, I was very obsessed with animal rights and welfare when I was a kid. I wasn't being shown videos mainlined into my phone every day about, terrible things happening to the environment, terrible things happening to animals. And that's just like one strand of thing that you could be activated by. Yes, wars happened, the Iraq War. I was terrified that my dad would be sent away to war. It's like, as an adult, I know that wasn't like, he was in the TA,
National?
Territorial Army. So
he
it
had
would
the
be like
draft
very unlikely. Yeah. But as like a 6-year-old, I just saw my dad in a military uniform. I knew that there was a war on the television and I conflated the two. But I didn't have visions of it on my phone all the livelong day, along with every famine that's happening, every humanitarian crisis, every disaster that's ever happened. Our brains aren't wired to be able to cope with the amount of information that we get at the level at, but was it somebody like an anthropologist or whatever the profession would be, we're really designed to care about like our families and our immediate societies, the tribe or our clan as we would have called it originally. Now we have the whole world's burden on us, and young people even more so because they've grown up with it. It's not mentally healthy. It's completely destabilizing. It's completely debilitating. And I think they probably feel, as young people do, a sense of responsibility towards it, which is also very strange because there's literally fuck all you can do. There's fuck all you can do, but you're being made to feel like you should be doing something.
Well, but I would also say that we have had in recent years, a handful of young people who don't know that much about their stories, but they've worked hard. They've been in certain situations where they've shown bravery. And then the world has created a platform for them to be these sort of beacons of young people doing things. And we're talking very young, right?
Do you mean, well, Greta
like
Thunberg,
Greta Thunberg? And
would you include the high school shooting kids
yes.
who end up, having to be spokespeople for like gun violence?
Yeah, exactly. And you just think that's okay. Like, yeah, it's very good again, but most young people are not equipped to be world leaders.
Yeah. Well, no young people.
Yeah.
Sorry, young people. No young person is equipped to be a world leader.
Wake up and do that. So, and arguably those people have media teams around them and, and again, like whole teams of full-fledged adults who are there to support them. But now they are on the world stage. I agree with you. I think it must be overwhelming. There's just so much going on and you can't healthily think about that many people or that many problems.
No, it's not possible. I suppose, would that be like a shying away from adulting growing up? Because, I mean, we now even feel like sometimes like, God, just sort of hide in our little, this whole fantasy people now have of like, whether it's trad wife, whether it's wanting to live off grid, whether it's gonna like, I'm gonna run away from capitalism and live in the woods. Yeah. It's all just this like, we're all so overwhelmed with the constant feed of everything in the world. But again, we at least had the benefit of growing up without that, where we were forming our personalities.
Yeah.
And our sense of self. And I wonder if now we're talking about it, because there's very much of young people, the concepts of privilege, of like activism, what is performative activism, if you're of a certain, if you're deemed to have a certain amount of privilege, I think young people feel that it's hateful to focus on themselves. Whereas when we were young, because none of these factors are really in play, your whole job was to focus on developing your sense of self. That's what growing into an adult was. You were supposed to take the time to hopefully broaden your minds, educate yourselves, learn about things, be better, rounded, better communicator. I guess this sense of personal development, but it wasn't done for whether it's likes or whether it's claps or whether it's prestige, but was literally done for you because that's what growing up meant.
Yeah. And it was also so that because you knew that if you put the time and energy into trying to do that, that you would then more likely to succeed at being an adult.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I did it at least. it's funny you bring up trad wives because, I mean, again, I'm sure there's whole worlds of Reddit I have not encountered yet about it. But when you look at this sort of like concept of a trad wife, in a way, it's just going back to what we sort of started off by talking about, which is this total relinquishing of responsibility. Nobody in their trad wife vision board seems to be talking about, changing diapers, taking care of 3 children under 3 by themselves, and cooking all the meals and doing all the things. It feels very much like a lady who lunches, but in a sort of like cottage core attire. Is certainly from like an outsider's perspective what it looks like, right? So it's none of the actual graft of being what a trad wife would have been historically. It's
You mean it only shows the like good sides of it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm making my banana bread and it feels beautiful.
Exactly. Let me picking flowers with my children.
Yeah.
Not like putting them to bed while they're screaming and they're crying and everybody and your husband's not there and he doesn't care and like
yeah.
You don't have enough money for the bills. And
totally. Yes, there are women I think who try and make kind of antidotes to that trad wife thing. But because I agree with you, self-infantilization amongst young people. Firstly, amongst women, it's one of the hallmarks of feminine social conditioning is infantilization. The husband is responsible. The father is responsible. You are literally a child in an adult body, essentially, which is, so just,
disturbing.
If you've not heard, disturbing, but also like a little bit of background. When I say femininity, I mean the socially conditioned role of expectations of women. For me, femininity is a social construct. Some parts of it I love, some parts of it I don't. Behaviorally, feminist analysis will say self-infantilization is part of that because, again, women were, it's that, there, dear, don't think about it too much. But obviously it's bullshit because, you're raising children and giving birth. These are not woo-woo, wofty, kind of enjoying nice, pretty things. Life, it's hard fucking work, physically, mentally. So it's not the reality of being a woman, but it is a part of femininity. Like broadening out from that, there's definitely, I hear people talk about young people in general seem to self-infantilize, like well into their 20s. They're still playing with things and making kind of culture out of playing with childish things, whether that's video games or a type like nerdy stuff. I mean, even into 30s. I know people into their mid-30s who are doing things that we did when we were 12 and 13. And I'm guessing it's a kind of cultural self-comfort of like wanting to run away from adulthood in a way that we just did not do. Well, I mean, remind me if I'm misremembering a time we were all in our 30s and we were like braiding each other's hair at sleepovers. Like, I don't know.
No, I mean, I do think that like, I don't think there's like anything wrong with playing a game of like Settlers of Catan with some people.
I don't know what that is.
It's a board game.
Okay. No, like I'm not trying to demonize board games. Pastimes that people have.
But no, I would agree with you. But I mean, I think that makes like logical sense but I would argue that if you're doing it socially, right? So even if you got like a good old D&D game going, at least you're getting together with other humans in real life, right? Which is a new thing, to play with them and to have play. And I think having play in your life is really important no matter what age you are. But I don't necessarily think that retreating into your own basement, whether or not you've moved out of your mother's, and playing video games all day long is like a healthy response to anything. But I would imagine, I don't know, I wonder if like older generations, like our parents, had versions of that. I grew up for a time outside of Boston in a very small town where the Revolutionary War started. And a significant portion of my friends' dads were in a group called the Minutemen, where they dressed up in Revolutionary War attire and they went to go pretend they were in the Revolutionary War.
Oh, America.
But again, at least they were in person.
Yeah. But is that, I know it's like a kind of make-believe.
Of course it's a make-believe.
But is it childish? I mean, you're cosplaying war.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. Well, that's true. But I guess when I was little, it was most boys like would draw pictures of guns and talk about war, and it was a more like socially accepted thing for little boys. So it still feels a little boyish to get dressed up in costume and pretend you're at war. But yes, you make
Is
a
that
good
because
point.
little boys are cosplaying at being adults?
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
I mean, I don't like it's not super cut and dry, and I'm not here to be like, if you enjoy anything that children also enjoy, then you're a self-infantilizing waste of space. Not at all. But I think it's more common in our generation than it has been previously. And when you you bring it together with the lack of wanting to be in the adult world.
I wonder if people like our parents' generation would view people like us, though, who don't have children and view that as a form of sort of shirking responsibility.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. And to be honest, I do wonder, and again, like we're in this bracket, so it's a general wondering. I'm not like accusing every woman or person who decides not to have children of doing this, but is it maybe sometimes in part be, again, not wanting to take on this responsibility. Like when you have children, your life isn't really your own in the same way anymore. I quite like having my life be my own.
No, we don't have children because I don't want that responsibility. Absolutely. Right. But at the same time, I don't feel, but that's, I mean, not that you're saying this, but I don't feel that's my responsibility that I have to have versus becoming an adult is non-negotiable unless you die at 18. And I hope that doesn't happen for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's going to happen. You just have to get on board.
Yeah. No Peter Pans here, dears. You're all gonna have to grow up. And we used to have a term for it, didn't we? Like I think particularly applied to men, and there's this big thing at the moment, isn't it? Like men just like being in their parents' basement on computer games well into their 30s, no job, no partner, again, not in the world. Is Peter Panningness. Yeah, that was like an insult, but like it wasn't something that you wanted people to say about you because it was not considered cool or like socially desirable to be behaving like a child when you should be at the age where you are responsible in the world and doing things of your own sense of self.
Yeah, completely. I wonder if there is a rise in the sort of Peter Pan-ishness, which I would wager a bet that there is. I wonder if it is, again, tied to sort of online, offline world, because, you know, if most people are existing offline, it is going to be the abnormality to be totally isolated, totally at home, totally not socializing, right? Versus if most people live online, then it's much easier to just kind of like skate through that. And that doesn't seem abnormal in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because everybody's online.
Yeah.
So...
And the onlineness, you can order your food. You can have fake sex with somebody on a video camera.
Yeah.
All of these, you
have friends that you play video games with. You socially chat to them while you're playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not the life that I would wish for people.
No, it's not. I'd just like to make a PSA announcement that being an adult's great. I haven't given up on that. Like I'm still happier being an adult than if you could press the rewind button and go back to being like 14.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Being an adult is the best thing ever. You're making a point. Yeah, I guess of a kid sort of being reflexively told that it's a sucky thing to be. No, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so good. I don't think it's talked about enough. Like, I guess you're a teenager where you're in this realm of like deciding how much of adulthood you want to embrace, really, and in your early 20s, and it's painful. Like it's really tough. You are really struggling to define your sense of self. You have a lot of pressure, and you guys have extra pressure from the online world that we just did not have. But it's very normal to feel kind of traumatized by being a teenager and to want to get away, I think, from the life that you have because it's all about external forces deciding who you are or who you're meant to be. And the great thing about growing up is that you get the choice to find that out for yourself. And that's sometimes really hard, but everybody goes through it. Everybody feels that way when they're a teenager. Everybody feels that there's somebody they're supposed to be, and it's probably not the person that you are now. And you don't really know even what that is. And you're overwhelmed of everybody else's opinions about what that should be. And it's really hard.
Yeah, completely. It is. But like you said, there's solidarity in the fact that everybody's been through it who's older than you, and everybody will go through it who's younger than you. It is just a part of life.
Yeah.
And you can either make lemonade, or you can sit on your lemons and watch them rot.
So inspirational.
Or make a lemon martini, babes. Do as I do.
Well, cheers, everybody. Happy adulting.
Yeah.